Hello, everyone. Hello. Welcome to Beers with Beers, Starry Wisdom's midnight Sunday. It's Saturday. It's turning to Sunday. Hello. Welcome. We're here to talk about long night related things, Nightbringer related things, cursed meteorites, cursed stones, anything, general context for the long night. I've actually, I'm wearing a Dune shirt here. Because of course, in the Dune universe, Arrakis has two moons, and I actually have a special guest. Hello, Quinn of Quinn's Ideas. I think you were still muted from when I asked you to mute yourself.
Hello, how's it going? How's it going, everybody? It's me, Quinn.
Yes, you're still high on the Dune hype, of course.
Yeah.
Quinn has an awesome YouTube channel, Quinn's Ideas, covers Dune on there. And if you're at all curious about the new movie, definitely want to check out Quinn's coverage of the new movie. You just put out a video covering the reviews of the people who got to see it. Everyone is so excited.
Yeah, except for like IGN, but it's yeah, but for the most part, everyone's like super excited, and it's like I'm super excited to see it next month.
Almost as excited as this chat right now, which is lighting up.
Hello.
Quinn. Everyone is happy to see you, of course. And yeah, that's actually not a bad place to start. Of course, there is two moons, and the place that it comes up in the story is when Paul is choosing a name with the Fremen. He looks up, and because he's had a dream about this, he asks them, what is the name of the shadow on the second moon? So he's not only named after the second moon, but a shadow on the second moon, which of course that's Muad'Dib, right?
Yes. The name of there's this little desert mouse that runs around in desert, and there's a shadow on the moon, like this dark spot that kind of looks like that mouse. So the Fremen have named it Muad'Dib. Yeah.
That's really cool. I didn't know that layer of it, but yeah, there you go.
Exactly.
So now Jon Snow, I would say that, Paul being a commentary on the charismatic leader, there's probably parallels with both Daenerys and Jon to Paul, wouldn't you say? Dany has the sort of living legend thing. Jon is doing the sort of like him amongst the wildlings, and at the wall is a little bit like Paul in the desert with the Fremen, like leveling up away from everyone, kind of, right?
Yeah, it's like when like normal people kind of acquire this like mystique and godhood. They're still just humans that make mistakes and are sometimes selfish, and they aren't perfect, even though they've been kind of like deified in the eyes of a lot of people. So yeah, I think that's the idea that I think kind of runs through all those different characters.
And the reason why I am reaching to make this comparison between Jon and Paul is because that idea of being named after the second moon, and specifically the shadow on the second moon, I think is something that George may have been thinking about, because in general, and we're going to talk about a lot of mythical astronomy claptrap here, but the whole idea about the moon apocalypse causing the long night has to do with the idea that there were two moons. And of course, in A Song of Ice and Fire, one might wonder maybe the moons were associated with ice and fire. And further research has shown, Quinn, that it seems like Daenerys identifies with a moon made of fire, while Jon is very much like a moon made of ice. And so this idea that Paul is associated with a shadow on the second moon, Jon is symbolically associated with this shadow on the second moon. So just kind of the interesting thing there.
Yeah, that is pretty cool.
So I am going to get into the two moons theory later. I didn't include it in the Nightbringer series. It does sort of have a lot to do with the long night. And somebody asked me a question about, well, that's great. Moon meteors cause the long night. What the hell are Jon and Dany going to do to fix that? How do we fix the seasons or fix the long night? Like, how does that even begin to happen, right? So
a magical solution.
Exactly. It's going to be a magical solution, and it's almost, I think that like somehow having the second moon get hit by the comet is going to equal things out, because if you had a moon of ice and fire and only one of them gets, fucked up, then it's like the forces are unbalanced. And that's when the others came out and the forces of ice sort of carried the day. So I'm wondering if maybe there's going to be something about knock it into the second moon. That's
There should be no moon. There should just destroy the other one, and then it'll cancel itself out.
Well, so if we have no moon, the Earth is fucked. Technically, we would sort of fall on our side and sort of wobble out of control. All kinds of really bad things would happen, turns out. And all of this is a little bit unrealistic as far as the moon cracking and parts of it falling to the Earth. Like almost anything like this would wipe out all life on Earth. So Martin is playing fast and loose with physics, which is fine.
Of course, it's fantasy. Like we couldn't. I don't think civilization could really survive if they had the potential to have like 10-year winters. I really don't know if we could like make it past such like drastic changes and that are like so unpredictable as well. I mean, they can kind of predict it in Westeros, but it's just like, man, all your crops die. It's like it'd be difficult to maintain any kind of like law or like balance or anything really.
Yeah, I have no idea how that works. I always feel like that's something that's hugely glossed over. Like how would people grow enough food and store enough food? I'm not really sure. But the thing is, I think what we have to assume is that the plants probably evolved to suit that nature or whatever. And that's just not very interesting topics for fantasy.
He's not going to go into the details about
it'll be one of those things where Sam starts babbling and Jon cuts him off, be like, yes, very long ago, right? So Gabe the Griffin, thanks there for the $20 super chat. Appreciate that, guys. And if you want to support the program, of course, you can use the super chats or paypal.me mythical astronomy. Good way to go. So let's see, where do I even want to start with all this stuff? I invited you on specifically. Obviously, you have an extensive knowledge of Lovecraft as well as Dune, and Lovecraft is a major part of where George was drawing things like the Church of Starry Wisdom and the general notion of cursed stones and stuff like that. So that's what I want to talk about, and we can make alpaca jokes about the color out of space and stuff like that. But
yeah.
The first, just to give you an idea, like why would fantasy authors, guys, think that meteorites will be cursed? Well, it's because comets and meteors fuck shit up when they land, and people have feared them all through history, even though the meteorites are often considered sacred. Like Tutankhamun had the knife made from meteoric iron ore. That was a recent discovery in the last decade or so. I think they found that, which is cool. A little meteor, dawn action there. But of course, if they land, they screw everything dies. Like the Tunguska event, if it had happened over a populated area, would have wiped out thousands of people. So of course, when you start to see one of these in the sky, this is like a portent of doom. It's associated with Julius Caesar's death. There's a few other folkloric things like that, but it's not hard to sort of put together the basic idea. Like these are when the stars fall to Earth, sort of remakes the world, right?
Well, the thing about Lovecraft is Lovecraft was really into astronomy. He like wrote tons of articles on astronomy. He was like obsessed with comets and watching comets. Like he wrote dozens of articles on astronomy before he started writing short stories. So like definitely like he was like watching the stars and like looking at the comets and like thinking of like freaky ideas. Like what if, there was something to this? And I think there's this general idea too, like in fiction and mythology, I think, of like when comets come or like you see them pass by the sky, it's like an event. It's like heralding something because it's an unusual event. Just like I guess there's all this mythology surrounding like an eclipse for the same reason. It's an unusual event, like in a star falling out of the sky. So I think that's part of the reason there's a lot of like associated mythologies. And I'm sure like, I guess like human beings too, we like make associations, like something like unusual like that happens and the next day the king dies. So a lot of people are going to make the association that, oh, the king died because of the comet. And like a lot of stuff happens like that in the Song of Ice and Fire too. You have like all these different people like making all these different associations with the red comet. Like, no, it means this, it means that. So yeah.
Yeah, I was just gonna say George has a fucking field day with that, having everyone look at it and think about what it means. And most people are fairly ominous about it. It means blood and fire, it means dragons, it means whatever. Some of the more violent people in the world are fired up about it, like Theon and Aeron, the Ironborn are, oh, it's fire and sword. We're gonna go out into the world and kill people. It's everyone calls it Joffrey's comet to sort of fawn and cater to Joffrey. Is sort of an absurd thing. George presents it in Sansa's chapter in a funny way, where like everyone was calling it Joffrey's comet, but Sansa was like, I don't, kind of skeptical about it and stuff. So
Why would it be
now
Joffrey?
one of the best ones, and you mentioned the idea of the comet as a harbinger of doom. Of course, in King's Landing, there is a crazy prophet. Okay, so he says, "Corruption!" the man cried shrilly. "There is the warning. Behold the father's scourge." He pointed at the fuzzy red wound in the sky. From this vantage, the distant castle on Aegon's Hill was directly behind him, with the comet hanging forebodingly over its towers. Clever choice of stage, Tyrion reflected. "We have become swollen, bloated, foul. Brother couples with sister in the bed of kings, and the fruit of their incest capers in his palace to the piping of a twisted little monkey demon. Highborn ladies fornicate with fools and give birth to monsters. Even the High Septon has forgotten the gods. He bathes in scented waters and grows fat on lark and lamprey, while his people starve. There's more and more pride comes before prayer. Maggots rule our castle. Gold is all. The rotten summer is at an end. Whoremonger king is brought low." You know, talking about when the boar did open Robert, a great stench rose to heaven, and 1,000 snakes slid forth from his belly, hissing and biting. He jabbed his bony finger at the comet in the castle. "There's the harbinger," or it's over here, sorry. "Cleanse yourselves," the gods cry out, "lest ye be cleansed. Bathe in the wine of righteousness, or you shall be bathed in fire." Then everyone echoes, "Fire!" So you can sort of see the scene here. This is the most menacing version of people looking at the comet and thinking that it means something.
Yeah.
Sorry, I had to get fired up with my mad prophet vibe there.
When it comes to like, you know, like fanatics, it's like they will look at really anything and use it as a chance to associate it to something that they can like turn into like dogma or like preach about, you know.
Yeah, you had your Y2K cults and stuff like that.
Exactly.
That was literally like a complete computer glitch based on the base 10 decimal system that people turned into a cult like reason. But getting back to the Lovecraft thing and looking at the stars, you know, Lovecraft, a lot of people have speculated, and I definitely think this makes sense to me, that like Lovecraft almost wasn't necessarily just writing all that. One feels like maybe he was dreaming half of it. This is almost like a man plagued by nightmares that he's like so compelled with that he has to write them down. This is the energy of the characters in his story who glimpse these things and then have to try to tell people about them, but they can't. Or so Lovecraft he's looking up at the stars, and instead of seeing something beautiful, he's seeing something menacing. You get the feeling like he saw them as a bunch of eyes staring down at him, watching us, these great elder beings that we can't comprehend, right? Is that where it started, you're saying, with all his astronomy?
It seems like it. Like he definitely looked at the stars and saw like the fearful side of things. And I think he wondered at the potential for like what could be like out in space. And I think like for him, like being someone that was looking at the stars and being an astronomer, he probably like saw it as like, I think at some point he realized how small we were in comparison to the rest of the universe. And I think that's probably what scared him the most, that idea.
Yeah, that's definitely the tone of all of his books. Like this tiny, insignificant mortal trying to comprehend these elder things that he really can't. So now the of course there's various classifications of elder gods and outer gods. So please, I'm speaking loosely whenever I use those terms. I don't know the old ones and the great old ones, but some of them do come from the stars, right? And a couple of them ride to Earth on meteorites. Isn't that not the case?
I can't think any of the top of my head.
Well, I'm thinking of the color out of space. I guess it's maybe doesn't carry beings, but just a cursed energy or something like that.
The color out of space, it's actually kind of vague in the story what it actually is.
Okay.
They call it a color, though it also does say in the book that like that's just a word they're trying to use to describe it, but they don't really know what it is because they can't really comprehend it quite. And yeah, you can look at it as kind of like a curse from outer space. It's some kind of organism that isn't exactly compatible with what's here. So it kind of changes everything in a really weird way. Everything here has like weird reactions. Like it turns like crops big and foul. It drives people mad. The animals will go insane and their meat will be foul tasting and stuff like that. So it does kind of like, in a sense, curse the land around it.
I guess I was reading into it that like in a world where you know, with all these outer gods, we have this meteorite, and it's so foreign and weird. It's like, well, what kind of magical energy does it have? I guess I was just making that connection there.
Yeah.
Now go ahead.
I was going to say there's certainly all sorts of beings that come from outer space to Earth. In fact, pretty much all of them that got to Earth came from outer space. It says that like when the stars were in the correct positions, like they had the power to like leap from worlds freely, and then as the stars changed, they were like had varying degrees of power. Some of them got trapped in certain places and stuff like that.
Okay, well, that definitely makes me think of the idea that there was an eclipse at the time that the moon broke, because I've often wondered, it seems like a little bit overkill. Like Martin says, oh, the moon wandered too close to the sun and it cracked from the heat. Well, that's easy to understand as an eclipse. It's the only time you can see the moon looking like it's wandering too close to the sun. But of course, an eclipse doesn't crack the moon. And then we have all this stuff about the moon getting stabbed with a comet or a sword, yada, yada, yada. You know my theory. So, but it seems like for some reason, the comet hits the moon when this eclipse alignment happens. I believe that, as incredible as it sounds, the Bloodstone Emperor somehow did call the comet. I don't know how, you know, we've looked at the horn, Weirwood magic, whatever, but somehow that comet was called by a human magician. I think that's what we're getting. And so then you wonder, well, did he time this sorcery to the eclipse for a great reason? And so you're telling me that when the stars align just such a way, the outer gods can come to Earth or manifest on Earth. That seems to be the vibe Martin is going for there, isn't it?
Yeah, it seems like it. Basically, I think Martin is definitely considering like the cosmological alignment, and the role that has to play in his like magic system for sure.
Yeah, it's often find that he wants to conjure the emotional feel of Lovecraft, even if not going like to the specific detail. Like we don't actually get cats jumping down from the moon. Although I do want to mention the cats of Ulthar, because the moon, a lot of things live on the moon, especially in Dream Quest, but in a few of his stories, a lot of the stories have related like sort of world building and stuff. So the cats of Ulthar, they are these really cool helper cats, and they help one of the main characters, and they are just simply able to just leap from rooftops to the moon and back, right?
And, so yeah, it's in the Dreamlands. It's in Dream Quest for Unknown Kadathan. The character is Randolph Carter, who's going on this really interesting journey. It's very kind of like Neil Gaiman Sandman-esque journey through like the dream world. It's really, really cool.
Yeah, that was definitely the Lovecraft book out of the 4 or 5 that I read that I enjoyed the most. That one was dope.
It's much more fantasy than most of his stories.
Oh no, I'm sorry. The Cats of Ulthar just make don't they make an appearance in Dream Quest, but they're in another book more?
Possibly.
I think there is a okay. Well, anyways, nevertheless, point is things coming down from the moon. So when George came up with this idea of dragons coming from the moon, obviously it's a description of meteors, but on a sort of fantastical folkloric level, the dragon sort of coming down to the moon from moon to Earth is nonsensical, but it has this precedent in Lovecraft, which is kind of fun, which is the cats that can just leap up and down. Then we have the moon beasts, which sail to the moon on ships, and they are slavers who take their slaves and thralls to the moon and back and stuff like that. What can you tell me about the moon beasts?
They are just one of the various lower level creatures that appear in Lovecraft's mythology. Not too much information about them, really.
Are the moon beasts, are they the ones with the horns and the turbans, or are they the amorphous, polyphemus blasphemies that the horned turban people work for?
I'm not sure.
I forget. I think the moon beasts are the amorphous, polyphemus blasphemies. And it's the men of Lang that are ultimately turn out to be the people working the ships and wearing the turbans that cover up their horns. As we have discussed. But
yeah, I mean, the moon beasts aren't intelligent, I don't think, but the men of the horn guys are.
Yeah, so the Jake wants to know about the wall coming down. Oddly enough, appreciates both of our work. Me and Quinn did an awesome live stream about the wall last year, and you can find that on my channel. It's called The wall.
The wall.
And we talked about every different scenario that could bring down the wall, who built it, all that stuff. Obviously, if there's any kind of meteor event that brings on the long night, that would be the prime suspect for bringing down the wall. But, you know, it occurs to me, Quinn, that we don't really even know that the wall blocks the others, do we? We don't really have any evidence for that at all.
No, we haven't seen any of that. I mean, it's very possible that like there's another reason that they haven't tried to cross it yet, other than it being a giant ice wall. This could have just been a lie that people have been telling themselves this entire time.
I think it is. I think the others, I mean, yeah, basically we came around to two possibilities for that I recall anyways, for building the wall. It was either the others or it was some other motherfucker who could wield ice magic, obviously, right? So you either have the idea that maybe the children can manipulate ice magic with their voices pure as winter air or something, but more likely I'm thinking about a Stark magician that's an ice sorceress, just as Melisandre is a fire sorceress, something like that. But the more I think about it, I feel like the wall is just such a big, not a red herring, but the idea that everyone thinks that it stops the others is big set wall. Up to be false. I feel like it's going to be wrong.
Yeah, and the idea of a big wall is kind of such a primitive idea, right? Like that's the most primitive way to go about preventing something like this. Let's just build a big wall and hope that works. And then also it's made out of ice, which is the substance that these beings are made out of and can manipulate on like this strange supernatural level. So I just don't like it. It brings up a lot of questions.
And I've been digging into some Tolkien lately, like old Silmarillion stuff, and the Valar rather, when they after Melkor destroyed the two lamps, the original lights of the world, which is a long night inspiration, by the way. Before the sun and moon existed, and before the two trees, there were these two lamps, and Melkor knocked them over, and they created a big inland sea and stuff, and the whole world went dark. And then later, Melkor and Ungoliant poisoned the two trees, which the Valar had made in imitation of the sun and the moon. Those two trees, when they were destroyed, the last fruit and flower that were taken from those trees then became the sun and the moon. And one thing that I learned, Quinn, is that originally in Tolkien land, the world was flat. And that the Eru Iluvatar, the high god, he made the earth curved in order to hide the land of the Valar away from everyone. So it's literally floating in space because it was a flat planet, went like this. And so it left the continent of the Valar floating in space, which is wild. So before the sun and moon were created, it was a flat world with these two trees. And obviously Melkor and his spider, Ungoliant, who is the parent of Shelob, the spider from Lord of the Rings, they kill the trees. Melkor cuts them, and then the spider sucks the light and life out of the trees, and that darkens the world and leaves only the stars. So that is, to me, a big long night influence.
It's got to be, like, with as big of a fan as George R. R. Martin was as Tolkien. He's George R. R. Martin because Tolkien was J.R.R. Tolkien. So,
and then the other thing about that I was going to mention is, so the Valar, after Melkor knocked over the first two lights, they retreated to to a different continent because the earth was severed into three continents. They raised a giant cliff all along the ocean, basically all around the island. They raised a cliff mountain range to keep everybody out. So you wonder if maybe the others did that. Right, because the Night's Watch
wall to keep everyone else
out. Because the Night's Watch have all this dragon glass. It only takes one touch to pop another open and end his 8,000-year-old life. Thanks, Sam.
Yeah, you know. And they're like, "What are you doing? This is our territory. Like, you guys need to."
There might only be 12 White Walkers, right? There might only be those 6 or now 5. We don't know. There could be a very small amount, and so the wall blocks the army of the dead. We know that potentially. But it might not block the others. It might be something the others made to keep everybody the hell out of the lands of always winter. And George is seeing the lands of always winter as a really strange parallel to it's Aman is the land of the Valar. So that's something that occurred to me today. Because the Targaryens are very much like Sauron and Melkor turned into protagonists. They kept all the same dragon imagery, the same color, the black and red coloring, you know, all that traditional Tolkien villain stuff, and that's what Targaryens that's what they wear.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, the others have every reason to want humans to stay away, I feel like.
And also, oh, okay. So here's another thing that lines up. What's your theory on why the others are stirring?
Oh, so I mean, there could be a few reasons. It could be because they made a pact a long time ago and it's been breached at some point, or it could just be because like there's things that we don't understand about the past, and this is just like the time that they're awakening. I don't know. It could be several reasons. It could be like to reclaim something that was taken from them. Yeah.
So my theory about this is that it's Jon Snow's birth. And that ties in the idea that Jon is the prince that was promised to the others. The Starks are a bloodline descended from a baby stolen from Night's King and Queen, and that the others want it back. And that Jon's sacrifice to the others at some point will be part of appeasing a pact or a debt or something. So at Jon's birth at the Tower of Joy, George describes the eyes of the others in the sky. When Lyanna's rose petals are blowing, it says, the rose petals blew through, a storm of rose petals blew through the air, as blue as the eyes of death. The blue eyes of death are obviously the others. So it creates this idea like the others are in the sky watching the Tower of Joy. To me, the whole point of that would be to imply that they're watching out for Jon's birth. It fits with the idea that they're testing Waymar to see if Waymar is Jon. And then when they find out he's not, they kill him and dispatch him quickly. So it could even be the others who are watching the stars, waiting for the stars to align, the birth of the promised prince, the red comet. It's very much, again, going back to Lovecraft and the idea that these evil entities can manifest when the stars are right.
Yeah, I imagine that if there is something that's like magically significant about the alignment of the stars, then the others being magical beings and beings that wield magic and intelligent beings, that'd be something that they would notice, especially since they come out at night and like the stars are kind of like a major part of the night. So I don't know.
Yeah, and gosh, you know, their eyes look like stars. So it's like, do they watch the stars? Are they watching the stars?
Yeah,
probably. Maybe. They're probably really good astronomers, one would think.
Yeah, I imagine so.
So there you have it. And of course, you know, there's various theories about where the others come from, but they obviously show indications of having some level of humanity. They've got icy bones under the icy flesh, and speech and ritualistic behavior, and they ride horses and wear armor. So the idea that they're astronomers or they have their own prophecies, you know, it's easy to forget that. It's easy to just think of the others as what was on the show. They can't talk. I know you're really still mad about the Night King not talking.
Well, George R. R. Martin has always said that he wanted to write the others as being more than just like mindless villains. And I believe him when he says that. So I have to imagine that they have like some thoughts in their heads and they're not just like, bruh, kill. Yeah.
Yeah, and if you look at the Fist of the First Men, there's a little bit of strategy too. They send the whites there, and then they sort of chase the Night's Watch away from the Fist, but they don't wipe them out. They sort of harry the baggage train, chasing them all the way back to Craster's in the Wall. So it seems like you picture the others back in the woods, like battle commanders sending the whites, you know, like an army. So it's human strategy there. Got to see a super chat here. What is the first person to their species? Does he help their numbers grow, or does he help heal them and feed their icy bodies? Oh, you're talking about. Oh, you mean first, like the perspective, first person perspective of their species? Is that what you're asking?
Oh yeah.
I think we're talking about the idea that, well, the first person in their species would be the creator of the others. That's the Night King. Okay, so then the idea of the others going back into the Weirwood is my theory about how we need to fix the problem of the others. The idea that there are some, in part, spirits that were torn out of the Weirwood tree and made into these icy bodies, and they've got to be They've got to go back in, and that's why we need to get the green seers out of the weirwoods and into Bran's brain to make room for them. I think that's what you're referencing, but I'm not sure about the first part of the question. Mr. Enite, can you clarify in the chat? What is one person to them? Oh, why would Jon be special to them? Okay. Well, Jon would be special because he is the first person to combine the blood of the dragon and the blood of the other in millennia since original Azor Ahai. And again, this is my theorizing, not canon. What we know is that Jon has skin changer blood and almost certainly the blood of the dragon. I further theorize that the Stark bloodline contains the blood of the other, like I was just saying. So if that's the case, then the reason why they come in for Jon is he's the first Stark, the first blood of the other that has the dragon blood again. And again, the original Azor Ahai or his son or some Azor Ahai person, I think, became Night's king. And when he gave his fiery seed and soul to Night's queen, it's her icy magic that flipped all of that fire mojo to ice. And that is why the others have burning blue star eyes and nothing burns like the cold and all this stuff. And they almost look like Valerians. They kind of are Valerians in that sense, in that Azor Ahai might have been Night's king. Again, my theory. So that would explain why they want Jon, is because he's the first person since their daddy, since the original creator of the others, that's combining this dragon and other blood. So that would make him very special. And even if that's not true, it could just be the dragon and skin changer blood that makes him special. Or it could just be he's the 800th Stark born at the time of the Red Comet, and so it's him. It could be any of those things.
Yeah. Maybe he's just the appropriate vessel at the appropriate time. I don't know.
Right. Like it's the cosmic alignment, and he's just the Stark that's born then.
Well, yeah, this is the best one, you know?
Check out the prince that was promised to the others for my more coherent and longer theory about that. And I got a couple. Here's one from an unpronounceable username. Just got sent home from work because some dude got in my face and I had to show him. Thanks for making the rest of my night. Okay, well, you got to stand your ground sometimes, my friend, like Sandok the Shadow on the bridge outside Maegor's Holdfast. That's a scene we should break down one time. It's a cool fight from Fire and Blood. But hopefully you still got your job, and it's just got to cool off there, buddy. But yeah, I'm here to make your night better. Thanks for hanging. Me and Quinn both night owls, so. So some people have wondered, Quinn, if the others is probably not something Martin will ever really, get to, but is he implying them as being from space? Is that the point of their having star eyes? Are they like weird entities that came here on the meteor through magic and then manifested? Now I think they came from the Weirwoods and stuff, but the Weirwoods seem to have been altered by the meteor impact. The meteor impact seems to have changed everything. And in all the symbolism mock-ups, we see this before and after, where the meteors are poisoned. Again, cursed bleeding stars, cursed meteors and stuff. The moon meteors seem to poison things. They leave, Ashai. Look at Ashai; it's all poisoned and black and shadowed. So they might have altered the Weirwood physiology. Oh gosh, I totally lost myself on my train of thought. What was I trying to ask you about?
About the others coming from space,
right? So, because they manifested at the time of the long night, so maybe some part of their mojo, their magic, the magic that animates them, the reason why Night's Queen was able to turn into a blue star-eyed priestess or whatever, is some big honkin' moon meteor in the heart of winter.
Yeah,
that's like a black, some black fucking obelisk or something like that.
I could see that. I mean, it would have to go like I see the others as kind of a manifestation of like earthly natural forces, they're like nature kind of biting back. So I feel like it would have to be almost like this thing, whatever it would be if it came from outer space. It would almost be like giving power to nature. It's like it's giving a voice to nature. It's altering it in that way and making it alive and making it being able to fight back for itself. If that were the case.
That's kind of what I'm talking about. It's like the animating magic, kind of like in The Color Out of Space, where the meteor affects the biology of everything and causes weird things to happen.
Mm-hmm.
The parallel is actually Azor Ahai himself. I always talk about him as a magician that wants to steal the magic of the Weirwood Net, and he's essentially breaking into the Weirwood Net by means of Nissa Nissa. Nissa Nissa being a children of the forest. Azor Ahai sacrifices her, uses her connection to the Weirwoods, breaks in and becomes the first human green seer to invade the Weirwoods. So the parallel basically would be the comet striking the planet and creating the others, because it's Azor Ahai going into the Weirwood Net that forces out the others and pushes them out of the trees, exiles them from the wood, et cetera, and leads to their creation. So, yeah, I mean, I don't think we'll ever get a White Walker sitting down and explaining White Walkers come from not the moon, but from the Pleiades. That's probably happened. But it's, again, Martin likes to imply softly that sort of.
It's kind of like how he says the great emperor of the dawn came from the stars, and then when he died, he went back into the stars and stuff like that.
That's a great point. Actually, I had totally forgotten about that. You're right. He did.
And then it also says something. No, I don't want to say this. I could be remembering this correctly. I could have sworn it said something about when he left other stuff maybe coming, but I don't. That could be me making that up. I don't know. I could be totally making that up.
I just got distracted by something in the chat. Go back at what were we just talking about?
When it says that the great emperor of the dawn went back into space or whatever, I thought that
he does go back up. No, he does.
Yeah, but I thought that maybe it said something about other things coming after he left, but I feel like I could be making that up. And maybe
there's not another thing about he rides around in a pearl palanquin.
He does.
Which sounds almost like a white meteor or a sacred stone or something like that, because the pearl is a moon symbol, right? And then at the end of the Great Empire of the Dawn, we have the Bloodstone Emperor worshiping the black meteor. So you have this first god emperor. He comes down from the stars, rides around in a pearl. So I'm not sure what George is talking about here. Maybe he's just saying, "Oh, this is a moon king," or what's that?
He's a spaceman.
Spaceman, exactly. So there's definitely that starry connection. It came from the stars mythology to the oldest civilization in the world. So that's pretty cool. And then of course that eventually gave rise to the Church of Starry Wisdom, which Marwyn and Quaithe are members of.
The Church of the Starry Wisdom.
Yeah, they get a bad rap.
Reference.
I think they're going to be on our side, though. That's the thing. It's like they're concerned about the others. Quaithe wants Dany to use the dragons against the others. So does Marwyn. I mean,
that'd be another example of George R. R. Martin kind of inverting a Lovecraft thing, because they're very much like, you don't want to really deal with the Church of the Starry Wisdom in Lovecraft's work. Really.
Well, give me a couple minutes on that. I actually don't know anything about it.
I mean, well, it's vague, and they appear up in a few different stories. They're just this ancient cult that has existed since the really, really old days. Okay, so if you want to think about the timeline of the Lovecraft universe, so you have to so there's the Age of Man, which is just a blip, but eons ago, before man was here, the dominion of the earth was the old ones that came out of the stars and all the beings that were below them. And so after they died and they were sleeping beneath the ground, yada, 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 and man came. In the dreams of men, they spoke to them and they whispered to them and they told them where to find these idols, because these old ones brought their images from outer space with them. And so they put this into their dreams, and these people went out, sought out, and found these idols and stuff. And they basically wrote down all of the knowledge that was basically implanted in their minds through their dreams from the old ones. And that's where these religions started, and this cult came from, the Church of the Starry Wisdom. So they're basically the old cult that keeps the old ways, and they're just basically waiting for the old ones to wake up again and reclaim the earth.
Okay, so they are basically in service to all the unpronounceable bad guys.
Yeah.
Nyarlathotep and
they were kind of tricked in a way, because it's they're primitive men, and they're kind of dreaming and being told things by whispering voices essentially, and it's write down this, and these are the secrets of the universe. I don't know. That's basically the deal.
Well, that's definitely somewhat fits. I mean, Quaithe is from a Shy and seems basically designed to info dump Dany information about ancient shit from a Shy, Azor
Yeah.
Ahai, the dragons, and all that stuff. So she definitely, as a Starry Wisdom member, like that makes sense. She's keeping alive a lot of hidden knowledge there. So, but the twist is that it's not necessarily to bring the downfall of humanity, but rather secrets that Dany will need to, help save the day.
I guess the thread that runs through it is that it's very, very, very ancient magical knowledge that's been passed down from eons and eons ago. They're remembering things that I think are forgotten by like most humans, and they're passing it down.
Yeah, that's almost sort of makes you think of the Weirwood Net too. When you think of, you've got these human green seers, but they're following in the footsteps of potentially children of the forest and green men and stuff with these inherited memories. But okay, so that's cool. Got a super chat from Darth Locust. Woon as the last hero. It's just a quick request, I guess. Thanks, LML. Special rehab from Rehab Times, and don't forget the Unnatural Winter Storm at Winterfell. Okay, we could talk about that. Woon as a last hero. Well, he is smashing a symbolic other. He's got Patrick of King's Mountain in his hand, and he's flailing him up against the wall. That's the cut. That's when Jon dies. That's what's happening. So for the last 10 years, in my mind, Woon is still bashing Patrick of King's Mountain against the wall. It's like he's just a bloody pulp. He's a mess by now. But Patrick of King's Mountain, of course, it's a Dallas Cowboys reference, and Woon is a reference to 1-1 Phil Simms, who plays for the New York Giants. It's a nerdy football thing. Don't worry about it, Quinn. But
I've heard the story before.
Right, of course, everyone's heard it. So Patrick of King's Mountain, though, he's dressed like an other. He has blue stars on a silver and white coloring. And there's some other scenes where he gets the other symbolism. A lot of Salisa's Queen's men have other symbolism. In fact, they all do. So Woon, at the very least, he is smashing a symbolic other against the wall. It does make you hope that he's gonna that's one thing I liked on the show. It's like they recruited a giant or two to help fight with the humans. I dig that. I think that'll happen. The Unnatural Winter Storm at Winterfell. It's a little bit of a speculative, but it does seem like the storm in Dance with Dragons is the worst around Winterfell, because at the wall it's not even snowing that bad at the same time. I believe people have pointed out.
Well, that's where Winterfell. No, I'm kidding.
Well, is there something to that? Is there, because there isn't a Stark in Winterfell? Is that drawing the cold, or is the cold coming out of the crypts? Is that the Stark other connection coming out, or what is that?
Perhaps. Who knows what's going on? I think George R. R. Martin is waiting to this next book to drop a lot of the big bombs. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like, for now, a lot is up in the air. Like there's a lot of like potential things that could lots of potential directions. I don't know.
Storms do, of course, move around. So like it could be completely just George wanted heavier snow around Winterfell for this battle, so the storm is moving over Winterfell right now. But of course, it obviously could be something more magical too.
It is definitely possible that there's something magically significant about Winterfell and something magically significant about the saying of always having a Stark in Winterfell, for sure.
Right, because not only is there not a Stark, there's like a mockery of, there's like fake Starks, pretender Starks.
It's like, this isn't good. Yeah.
Now, the idea of the Starks, there always needing to be a Stark in Winterfell, that sounds like the terms of a pact that somebody made a long time ago in the past, kind of. And this would bring me back to the idea that the Starks maybe contain the blood of the other. So this is why their bloodline could be important to remaining in Winterfell. And when they leave, are they breaking a deal with the others? Or is that just a part of a magic warding spell that they need to be there to hold it together?
I think the idea that the Starks have other blood is almost certainly true. I think that's one theory that's like, it seems like almost like it's, it just fits perfectly. I think it's almost certainly true. Yeah,
it is. It's like you could get into the weeds with it, or you can just step back and say the Targaryens are the blood of the dragon. So wouldn't it be cool if the Starks were the blood of the other? It'd be kind of symmetrical and stuff. And that is indeed, I believe, what is going on. Plus, like, all of the Knights Queen parallel figures they are Starks or they have Stark symbolism. Lyanna is the most important Knights Queen parallel figure. She has the blue winter rose crown, which is like a lunar halo crown. She's an ice moon maiden, as I like to call her. Another good one is Jane Poole. Her sigil is a blue circle. So again, like a blue icy moon. And she does very heavy Knights Queen stuff when Ramsay marries her, rapes her. She looks like a cold corpse under the blankets when they come to rescue her. Her nose, she gets frostbite later. So she has a ton of Knights Queen symbolism. It's very easy to recognize. She's posing as a Stark. Val is a Knights Queen figure. She almost gets engaged to Jon and made the Lady of Winterfell. Visenya is a Knights Queen, and she's not a Stark, but George uses the word Stark to describe her personality and features a couple of times, just as like a fun way to do it. So I definitely think that Knights Queen was a Stark. And in fact, when you go back to the Azor Ahai Knights King pairing, what I think, Quinn, is that Knights King is Azor Ahai. That's your dragon blood. Knights Queen is a Stark. And even though we're told Knights King is a Stark, I think that's like a little bit mixed up. It's their child that would have been the stolen other baby that went back and then became a Stark again. But this is how you get, and he might have been the last hero. And that's what I'm getting to. Is the last hero a Dane or a Stark? This is like a hard thing to answer because the Danes have all the Sword of the Morning Dawn symbolism that seems to go with the last hero. And the Starks are just, they seem like they would be, the last hero would be a Stark. He has a dog, like it's probably a wolf. And right. So then there's the whole Eldrick Shadow Chaser thing. I've pointed out that Elric of Melniboné is a huge influence on George. He's a dragon sword hero. He's albino. Melniboné is like Valyria. I've talked about that a bunch of times, and I'll talk about it tomorrow. Point is, George made one of the other names of Azor Ahai Eldrick, which is very close to Elric. But then he dropped Elric name variants in House Stark and House Dane. So you have Edric Dane and Ulrich Dane. And then you have Edric Snowbeard and Elric Stark. So I feel like the last hero is tied to Stark and Dane. That's not breaking any ground. This is obvious stuff. The way that works, Quinn, is Azor Ahai as a Dragon Lord. He's basically a Dane because the Danes come from the Great Empire of the Dawn, where Azor Ahai came from. So they're the last hero child, as a child of Knights King and Queen, would be like dragon and other, essentially. And sorry if that's a whole bunch of tinfoil for you guys, but that's how I'm seeing it. So
well, yeah.
It's just the headcanon. But I like the idea of Knights Queen being a Stark. That's the thing I'm most attracted to. And we speculated one time about Knights Queen maybe being down in the crypts or something, right?
The Knights Queen?
I talk about that with you?
I don't know if you talked about that with me, but that's an interesting idea.
Well, so Lyanna's statue is down in the crypts.
Yeah.
And it's the only woman statue that we ever hear of.
Yeah.
Lyanna being a Knights Queen symbol, that's what kind of got me onto it. Like, oh, maybe that's a clue about Knights Queen living down there.
That'd be interesting. Yeah.
Anyway. All right. So let me pop over here. I got a couple of PayPals. And if you want people to send you money, Quinn, you should answer their questions and give them credit when they send you money. That's what I have found.
Yeah.
So Tammy Swanson, by the way, how long are you able to hang tonight?
About 10 more minutes, probably.
Okay, sounds good. Well, then I'll tell you what, I will hold these PayPals until then, so I don't make you just sit here and listen to me answer questions. I'm scanning real quick and seeing if there's one that I want to throw at you. Joe says, so awesome seeing Quinn join the stream. Thanks for the EU-friendly stream, just showing some love. Thanks, Joe. And Hypatia says, thanks for the lovely Sunday morning surprise. We have evidence that the others were awake for a long time before the story starts, based on Craster's sacrifices, correct? And that's why I say Jon's birth, because it's about 16 years ago. Is that long enough time for Craster to be, or does that go back longer?
I think This Craster thing, it seems older to me.
I think it would have to be,
It seems older to me because I mean, it just seems something that he just kind of totally accepts, and like his daughters slash wives, they totally accept, and it seems like something that's been going on. I don't know.
So I
I
actually
think
meant, but based on the ages of his wives, has Craster literally been doing this longer than 16 years? I think so.
I
But
think
you're
so.
also
Yeah.
right that he probably learned this from somebody.
Well, even I
Right.
think, yeah. I think the others have been awake for at least like 2 or 3 decades. I think probably
And
about 40 years.
it could be that they can take the baby sacrifices before they're quote unquote stirring.
Mhm.
The stirring is, most people are referring to Mance Rayder talking about the others essentially driving the wildlings out of the north. That is why the wildlings are advancing on the wall, is because the others have been giving them so much trouble. And they were saying not even the Thens could resist them. So that's the stirring. And that's only been happening for a few years, maybe a decade or something like that. So that's where I'm saying Jon's birth, maybe. But
It's possible that maybe the baby sacrifices help them wake up in some way. Maybe they needed life pays for life. You know what I mean?
yeah, they're
And
swelling
death
those
pays for
ranks.
life. Yeah.
Or just to sustain them, maybe you're saying.
Yeah, to wake them up, maybe like for an other to be born, you have to take the life of this baby. I don't think that's far out there. I mean, that's an idea that's in all types of horror stories, like the sacrifice of a baby, like it's a witch thing, weird pagan stuff.
Oh, George has a ton of it. I mean, Dany ends up doing it not on purpose, but Rhaego's death pays for the waking of the dragons.
Yeah.
Euron is ready to sacrifice his children in a magic ritual, the one that he put in Filia Flowers, if you will. Sorry to be crude.
And usually like something like a child sacrifice is more potent because it's thought to be like a pure soul that you're like giving unto something.
It's also George has got this idea of, it's like a trade-off. Like if you're trying to gain personal power, you can sacrifice your fertility. And so we see some people literally lose their fertility, or we see people sacrifice their children. And Dany's both. She's lost her fertility and she's sacrificed her child. And this is like it's the opposite of laying your life down so that other people can live. So Nissa dies to make Lightbringer. That is a parallel to the women that die giving birth to special children, like Lyanna, Dany's mother, Tyrion's mother. Tadia, spoiler alert. No. And of course, if you don't know, you plug Tadia real quick.
Tadia is my graphic novel, and yeah, it's coming out pretty freaking soon. It's in the lettering phase right now, and that's happening.
And it's very easy to find. Click on any of Quinn's videos, and it's right in the description of the video. I have the privilege of having seen very close to a finished product. Everything but the lettering, right, is what I saw.
Yep, the lettering is being worked on, and that's right. The lettering is basically where they put like little bubbles in. For those of you that don't know that,
it's you guys are not going to believe how nice it is. I don't want to like just sort of go nuts or whatever, but it's unbelievably good looking.
All right, there we go.
There's your cover right there.
These are my test books without the lettering and stuff like that. Yeah, guys, find my book. Here you go.
It's well, I'm really excited for you, man. You're working with some great folks. Particularly your artist is amazing, and yeah, it's gonna be good. The color really is unbelievable too.
Yeah, we got an incredible colorist, John Francois Belliot, that has worked on like a bunch of Image comics. Like he's fantastic.
So getting back to what I was saying, George shows us some people that lay down their own lives to give birth to children or to save the world in the case of Nissa. Then he shows us people like Euron who are chewing up lives like a meat grinder, just chewing them up to gain his own power. So these are kind of the two opposite ways that people can operate with magic, through more of a self-sacrificial way or through a predatory way. And those play out into the sort of themes of the story, people that self-sacrifice or act in a predatory fashion.
I think for the story to be fulfilling, and I know George R. R. Martin understands this, there has to be more cost to that kind of predatory magic than simply the sacrifice that you're making. It has to have some effect on the person that's committing the magic. So I'm going to make a Harry Potter reference. the idea of creating a Horcrux. So basically, a Horcrux is a magical object, or just any object that you can put a part of your soul into, so that when you're killed, you can't die. But in order to do that kind of magic, you have to make a sacrifice. You have to kill someone. But the act of killing someone is what splits the soul. And by tearing your soul, ripping it apart, you become less of a human. You become less of what you were.
Right. That makes perfect sense. This is definitely the way that George thinks about magic. Talks about it having a cost. I say sometimes he's more interested in the cost than the actual magic. So that makes a ton of sense. And he also, you see that with the characters that commit violence, like Ramsay or Joffrey, or anybody that's committing violence. George shows us how it transforms them as well.
Yeah.
So you wouldn't call them a victim because they're the perpetrator, but they sort of become a victim of their own nature.
It has to have some stakes. I mean, you talk about like the Azor Ahai calling the moon meteor and making it hit the moon. Like, I can only imagine what kind of like sacrifice an act like that would have had, such like a powerful thing. That had to be like, I imagine like a bunch of priests chanting and like some sacrifices happening and like.
Well, it looks like that Bloodstone Emperor picture that we both use all the time, right?
Mm-hmm.
With what's the video game that's taken from? Lineage 2. It's Lineage 2. Yeah. So I've mentioned this a bunch of times, but I definitely think the Hammer of the Waters legend is the same story. The Hammer of the Waters sounds like a moon meteor. Obviously, it's something falls, hammers the land, and collapses an entire land bridge. Meteor is basically the only thing that could do that in practical terms. An earthquake, that's a little more than what an earthquake could do. It really does sound like a meteor. Then we see on the Isle of Faces, we had a bunch of blood magic. And if Nissa was a child of the forest, then they're almost the same story, because we're hearing about green seers sacrificing captive children of the forest on the Isle of Faces, and this calls down the hammer, or Azor Ahai kills Nissa, calls down the moon meteors. To me, it's the same story. So I think it was a lot more than Nissa that got killed. It would have been Nissa and a ton of children of the forest all at the same time. And there's a parallel to this. Euron Redhand of the Ironborn, he calls the King's Moot, where he kills everyone at the King's Moot. That's Euron Redhand. Euron Redhand. Okay, so the weirwood leaves have leaves like red hands. And he kills everybody inside Naga's ribs. And it says Naga's ribs run red with the blood of 13 captive kings and 50 priests. And those are weird petrified weirwood bones, Naga's ribs, as everyone knows. And so basically you have a red hand king feeding the blood of slain kings and priests to a weirwood. And there's 13 of them. So this sounds a lot like the Bloodstone Emperor ritual, where he's sacrificing a whole bunch of children of the forest to the weirwoods and cackling in delight or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, it makes me think about the current Euron and what terrible sacrifice he's willing to commit to do whatever he's going to do next. I mean, it's almost like scary to even think about, because it kind of just has to like up the stakes a little. George R. Martin's going to have to up the stakes, and he's already done some pretty fucked up shit, like with sacrifice in his book. So I'm wondering what's next. You know, what are you going to do?
And I would also add that the High Tower, being a white tower crowned with red flame, is a weirwood symbol. White tree crowned with red leaves. So Euron Redhand performing this blood magic at Naga's ribs, very much a preview of Euron performing blood magic outside a different weirwood symbol.
He's going to paint it red with blood.
Yep. Or we could even see something like in Numenor, when they burnt Nimloth, Alpharazon and Sauron, they burnt the sacred tree, and it turned the dome of the temple black. And forever after, there was this pillar of smoke that rose up. So I think that's another thing kicking around in the back of George's brain. Couple of super chats. Darth Locus, Ned Stark heard Bran. So maybe the children do have bad intentions, but he also could have caused paradox. Imagine if he told him about the future. So I think the time travel is going to be super limited, and George is going to stay away from wonky paradox stuff. It's not going to be dark or Back to the Future or anything quite like that. I do think we'll see something like what the Hodor happened on the show, but that was really bad. And I think that's essentially how it works with the Green Seers. If to the extent that they try to mess with time at all, it mostly creates abomination and horror. I think that's what we're going to see. So,
yeah, I get the sense that Bloodraven and the children maybe were kind of like shield brand from something. They weren't being directly honest in that scene, I felt like. But what their real intentions are, they could just be like, hey, this is really, really dangerous, and he just doesn't need to be messing with this right now. Or it could be that there's something they don't want him to see. I don't know.
It's definitely strongly implied that Bran can raise the dead. It's, you know, oh no, don't attempt to call your father back. You can't do that.
Ned was like, what? Try. Who said that? Like, no.
It's like, why would you tell me not to try if I can't do it? So, yeah, I think he could be involved in Jon's resurrection as well. I think the Jon resurrection could be definitely a team effort.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. And Henbot says, I think it's cool that tree branches and leaves is called the crown. Yeah, George uses that term a few times. When Jon goes to the Weirwood Grove of Nine, he uses it. So yeah, there's a couple of times that it's called a crown. And of course, the Weirwood leaves are also compared to, like I said, bloody hands or even fire a couple of times. So you think of a crown of blood or crown of fire on top of the burning tree.
Mm-hmm.
So it's more another clue that Azor Ahai is in there is what I'm saying. The man who wears the crown of fire. So anyways, Quinn, I'm going to dive deep into some moon meteor symbolism shit. Moon meteors forever.
All right,
Thank
guys.
you very much for coming through. You added a lot to our stream, and it's good to hang with you.
Yeah. Well, it's nice to see everybody. I hope you guys have a good night, and I hope you have a good stream. And peace out, Dave. Thanks for inviting me.
Cool, man. Thank you. I'll see you next time.
See you later.
All right. That was fun. So thank you. And once again, Quinn's channel is, of course, called Quinn's Ideas. Everybody knows that. But there you go. So let's do some PayPals first. Catch up on those. Thank you, everyone. Tammy Swanson. I'm sorry, I'm reading names and I shouldn't. Apologies. For the moon meteors, man. My simple Marxist lifestyle made getting this to you challenging. So it's long overdue, but thanks. Oh, I'm sorry. This is just a thank you. Thanking me for my positive mental attitude, PMA. Yeah, I've heard that term before. I'm all about it. Let's see here. Christian Celis thanking me also. And the Craster question that I got. All right. So, guys, yes, that was a fun discussion. That was great. It was just the kind of thing I was hoping to kick around. So, going back to what I was talking about at the beginning, I was talking about how comets are feared by mankind throughout history. And there's the legend of Atlantis comes from the writings of Plato, two writings called the Timaeus and the Critias. I think it's Critias. In any case, in the Timaeus, there's a little passage where it's Plato's ancestor Solon. You might remember Solon's laws from history class, right? So Solon is an ancestor of Plato, and that's where Plato supposedly got the story of Atlantis. And Solon got the story of Atlantis from the Egyptians, supposedly. And so I'm going to read this passage about Solon talking to the Egyptians. And it's got some mythical astronomy in it. So this is really cool. Check this out. Thereupon one of the priests, who was a very great age, said, "O Solon, Solon, you Hellenes," that's the Greeks, "are never anything but children, and there is not an old man among you." Solon in return asked him what he meant. "I mean to say," he replied, "that in mind you are all young. There was no old opinion handed down among you by ancient tradition, nor any science that is hoary with age. There is a story, which even you have preserved, that once upon a time Phaethon, the son of Helios, having yoked the steeds in his father's chariot, because he was not able to drive them in the path of his father, burnt up all that was upon the earth, and was himself destroyed by a thunderbolt. Now, this has the form of a myth, but really signifies a declination of the bodies moving in the heavens around the earth, and a great conflagration of things upon the earth, which recurs after long intervals. At such times, those who live upon the mountains and in dry and lofty places are more liable to destruction than those who dwell by rivers or on the seashore. When, on the other hand, the gods purge the earth with a deluge of water, the survivors in your country are herdsmen and shepherds who dwell on the mountains. But those like you who live in cities are carried by the rivers into the sea. And so the point is that Plato is hip to mythical astronomy and the idea that mythology has encoded within it observation of the heavenly bodies, the declination of the stars, or memories of real natural disasters. And so basically the Egyptian priest is taunting Solon, saying, oh, you have this funny story about Phaethon, and you guys think it's cool, but you don't even know what it means. It's actually mythical astronomy, bozo. So that's what he just said to Solon there. So wanted to read that, not only because it's mythical astronomy, and it shows that myth makers like Plato are very much aware of the concept of mythical astronomy. It's also talking about the cyclical destruction idea. You know, some say the world will end in ice, some say in fire, goes the famous Robert Frost poem, which inspired A Song of Ice and Fire. So A Song of Ice and Fire is literally named after the end of the world, a poem about the end of the world. And ice and, ice or water and fire, those are basically the two most common destructive elements. And so here we have Plato, or the Egyptian priest, telling Plato that's what happens. Every once in a while, the world gets destroyed in either water or fire. I see a super chat that I missed from Alaris. I have a theory that the events of A Song of Ice and Fire take place in their world's version of Kali Yuga, an age of chaos. What do you think? Well, it definitely is the end of an age. You might refer to this entire time of the unbalanced seasons as the age of chaos. And once the seasons are set right, then things will be more orderly, right, by design. So that could be a thing, but I don't know a ton about the Kali Yuga. I know a little Vedic mythology. Obviously, I did the Vedic origins of Dany and Drogon, but I don't know a ton about the Kali Yuga, other than it is a period of time and an age of chaos, as you say. I'm going back further. That's as far as I can go back. If there's any super chats beyond that I missed. Minty, do we have the doc open? A little behind the scenes talk. One of my mods and my girlfriend maintains a doc with super chats that I may have missed. Let's see. We didn't talk about using it tonight, though. Yes, we are. Thank you, Minty. Yes. Stalwart, Minty. All right. So Darth Locust asked, I missed this one. How many others are there? Well, we actually talked about that. I think there's probably only a handful, and that this explains why they are potentially protective. It explains why they may have raised the ice wall to keep the humans out, because their numbers are small and they die easy. All it takes is dragon glass or Valyrian steel potentially. So I think there may only be a few others. It's really the army of the dead that's the problem anyways. It's the army of the dead that's the problem, because you try to fight them and then your soldiers that die end up joining the other side. So I think that's the biggest problem with the others, is the army of the dead. The others themselves, you just need the right weapons. So there we go. Thanks, babe. And I'm just going to pour myself another glass of tea. Cup of tea. Not a glass of tea. What am I talking about? So do you guys want to hear about the ice and fire moons? a patron sent me in a question about this, and I think this is probably a good place to talk about it. And let's give this patron some credit. Credit's good. Everyone loves credit. Hellenbach Fitness, I believe, on YouTube. My only reservations about the comet moon meteors causing the long night is, how will Azor Ahai Reborn, i.e. Jon and Dany or whoever, be able to fix or change that sort of apocalyptic winter? How will overcoming the others reverse a physical geological event? Okay, so 2 answers I have. One, I sort of already hinted at, that we have moons of ice and fire. It was the fire moon that got popped open last time. So the ice moon getting hit will cancel it out and probably remove magic from the world. That would be my guess. And it wouldn't actually destroy the ice moon. It's going to get in the weeds, and I'll get here in a second. But ice moons basically are rocky moons that are covered in a global ocean of very cold water or liquid methane with an icy crust around the outside. So if George is imagining an ice moon, it would essentially get hit, shed its ice and water, and it would be left as a rocky moon, perhaps like the one Earth has. And this is all happening thousands of years ago or something, right? But I think that's what the ending will be, is that we will have a moon left, but it will be stripped of its ice and it'll be non-magical. Magic will have gone out of the world. That will leave this season's balance, because the ice and fire moons, I think, governed the seasons somehow. And when they were both uninjured, everything was in harmony. And so knocking one of them out of the sky and having some of those then corrupted moon meteors fall to Earth, we've got a piece of the fire moon. It's been burnt, and now it's on the planet. It's not supposed to be here. And this is where the oily stone comes in. The oily stone seems inimical to life. The jungle can't grow around it. It may be toxic, magically toxic. You know, the Ashai and the Shadowlands are toxic. So that's basically what we're talking about here. Oh, it's 4:20 a.m. on the East Coast. Well, I think I should pour my tea and have myself a smoke. So that could be the resettling, is that the ice moon getting hit will be part of it, and then the rest of it will be putting the others back in the trees on Earth, because everything happens, you know, as above, so below. It's got the sky ground parallel. So I would say that there's going to be a celestial action, which may be out of the hands of Jon and Dany. And then there'll be the sort of on the ground atoning for the ancient sins of the past. The ancient sin of the past is Azor Ahai invading the Weirwood Net and driving the others out of their comfy tree homes. I've said that many times. Check out the Weirwalkers video. And so fixing that will be a part of. So Dany's part, in, like I said, in Born to Burn the Others, she will free the whites from the bondage of the others potentially by burning the others. And there's a lot of symbolism with her freeing slaves and becoming the mother of slaves. I think she will have to do with setting the whites free. She may, her final death sacrifice, I believe that Dany will sacrifice herself to save the world, essentially. That could involve the Weirwood Net, just like Nissa was tied to the Weirwood Net. But we'll see. Dany, in her dream in the Undying, is falling towards a canopy of bloody hands. These are the freed slaves, of course, in the dream. But a canopy of bloody hands is also a canopy of weirwood leaves. So Dany is figuratively falling into a weirwood leaves, thinking they need the life, they need the fire. She gave it to them. She opened herself up. She gave it to them. She then falls into this canopy of red hands. So that sounds like Dany going into the weirwood at the end. Oh, don't be sad. Look, Dany's going to die a hero. That's the good news. Like, what we're not going to see is evil Hitler Dany, such as we saw on the show. She's going to die the biggest hero of the story. I have no doubt. So fear not. Jon's making almost a worse sacrifice, because he's going to end up like an eternal zombie with basically no life, like cold hands. But yeah, Dany's enemies will all be gone before she chooses to die. Yeah, I believe that is true also. Oh, I need to put the honey in. So, Okay, Moons of Ice and Fire. Where was I? Oh, yeah. So I'm going to go back to the actual moons thing because I think this is interesting. And it's a little bit superfluous. I didn't put it in the video, but it's cool. So Moons of Ice and Fire stands to reason that if we had two moons, they would be ice and fire moons because, like, you know, it's a song of ice and fire, right? Oh, okay. I see there's a couple of super chats that I missed that have been highlighted for me by my friend Minty. So I will grab those real quick. Mr. E-Knight asked, if an emperor rode a pearl palanquin and the Bloodstone Emperor worshipped the black stone, you've implicated that meteor tails having different colors could relate to the other emperors, empresses. Could be. I mean, the star eyes are a big thing, right? So it could be. I mean, again, it's a very soft implication. That's nothing we're ever going to find out about in the story. But yeah, I mean, the point is that the god emperor came from the stars. So these are star people. Even the Bloodstone Emperor is worshiping the stars with starry wisdom. So there you go. But yeah, perhaps they were all associated with comets. They do all hold flaming swords, of course. And here I will share the Gemstone Emperor art. I wanted to make a big deal about this on the live stream anyways. So let's do it now. My friend Atlantis Morissette drew the Gemstone Emperors. They have waited so long to be depicted. And so they were in the video. You've probably already seen them, but I will share them again. In fact, I will share them while I take my 420 break. How about that? How about that? Oh, yeah. So at Atlantis Morissette on Instagram, if you'd like to follow her, she has other Song of Ice and Fire art. She did a cool Child of the Forest that I'll show you in a second. But there's your Gemstone Emperors, friends. And also she, like very much that she did obviously different skin tones and ethnicities. The Great Empire of the Dawn would have had to have been a multi-ethnic empire, having encompassed so many different peoples. And obviously some of them should have been Asian looking, since Yi is, you know, basically an Asian culture in A Song of Ice and Fire. So definitely dig in the way that these have been rendered. Be right back. That was tasty. All right, and then we had another super chat that I missed from the same fellow with the unpronounceable username OCSJC13. I'm sure that's very meaningful. I just can't pronounce it. Thank you very much. Who will face off against? Let me put myself on the screen. Split screen. Who will face off against Euron and try to stop him? And does he know about the others already? If not, what will his reaction be? If so, what's his plan? So you may have missed a couple of videos on my channel called Euron, King of the Apocalypse, and Night's King Crow's Eye. I spent about half an hour more on each video going into this stuff. But I suspect that Euron has a lot of knowledge about these things. I suspect that he speaks about having seen gemstone, golden gods with gemstone eyes. He's sort of bragging about all the gods and peoples that bow to him that he's seen and conquered. And he mentions, I've seen golden gods with gemstone eyes. I'm sorry, the color is shifting on my camera a little bit when I put my hands up sometimes. In any case, So those are definitely the idols of the Great Empire of the Dawn, who are also associated with gold by virtue of Yi Ti. Yi Ti seems to be the one who's carried on the Great Empire tradition. They call their emperors god emperors, and they wear jade and gold. So that's, again, a reference to the jade emperors of Chinese history and stuff like that. So Euron probably knows about the Great Empire of the Dawn. He also refers to Dany as the most beautiful woman in the world whose eyes are amethysts. So he's casting her in the role of Amethyst Empress. He obviously seems like a Bloodstone Emperor type. One of his eyes, his blood eye, is described as either being black or blood red. So you've got that black and blood coloring of the Bloodstone Emperor, you know, and his symbolism, the bleeding stars and the black stone, bloodstone. So I see Euron very much as a Bloodstone Emperor, reincarnated, an evil Azor High, if you want to talk in terms of archetype. He's an Azor High Echo, but he's an evil, obviously an evil one. He's showing us my conception of Azor High as a monster who killed Nissa Nissa in a blood magic ritual to gain power and screw up the stars and stuff like that. So that is how I see the original Azor High Bloodstone Emperor figure, is a lot like Euron. He would be the closest match to it. So if he knows about the Great Emperor of the Dawn, he claims he's been to Valyria and Asshai. I definitely think he's been to Asshai. Hanging out in Karth as Urathon Nightwalker. Urathon Nightwalker, and I'm going to make a video about this, but Urathon Nightwalker, sorry, is almost certainly Euron. Euron has been AWOL from the Iron Islands for years, but he needs a base of operations somewhere. And we hear about this guy, Urathon Nightwalker, in whose house the glass candles are burning again. Well, like I just told you, Urathon Red Hand is Urathon Good Brother is the one that became Urathon Red Hand, Bad Brother. So he's an echo of Euron. Let me explain this again. Euron's ancestor is nicknamed Urathon, and Euron has parallels to him. So Urathon Nightwalker in Karth is probably Euron. And it makes sense for Euron to be playing with glass candles because Euron is collecting all forms of sorcery. And there's the link for King of the Apocalypse, Euron King of the Apocalypse. I've got a Euron playlist. So all the Euron stuff, live streams and videos are in one playlist on the playlist tab of my YouTube channel. So Euron is using glass candles, probably. Euron knows about the Great Empire of the Dawn, probably. He thinks that the bleeding star is an important sign that bespoke the end. So he probably knows about the Azor High prophecy. So he almost certainly knows about the others. Almost certainly. I mean, everybody knows about the others in Westeros anyways, at least as a folk tale. But Euron probably knows more about them and knows that they're real. So he may be planning on trying to use their power, or that may happen accidentally if indeed Euron is to become a Night's King leader of the others figure, as I speculated in those videos. Who's going to oppose him? I think that will be either Jon or Dany. There is a dragon fight over the God's Eye in the Dance of the Dragons that seems like foreshadowing for this. Aemond One Eye has a blue star sapphire in one of his eyes. Euron has a blue eye called a smiling eye, and obviously a blue star sapphire calls out to the others and their blue star eyes, right? So we've got Aemond One Eye with his blue eye. He's riding a dragon, Vhagar, that has symbolism of the ice dragon. I don't want to go into that. That's in Visenya Draconis episode of the Moons of Ice and Fire. But take my word for it, Vhagar is a symbolic ice dragon. And Visenya was an Ice Queen figure as well, who was the first person to ride Vhagar, of course. So we've got Aemond One Eye with a blue star eye riding an ice dragon, again, symbolically. His foe is Daemon Targaryen, who rides a red dragon and has Dark Sister, a black Valyrian steel sword. Of course, Daemon, badass that he is, leaps from one dragon to the other, jams the sword into Aemond One Eye's star sapphire eye, and everyone plunges into the God's Eye Lake. So you get the layered eye-stabbing symbolism. Point is, who is Daemon Targaryen? Well, it's probably Jon, right? I mean, it could be Dany. It's the gender isn't always in these sort of historical echoes of the main plot. The gender doesn't always stay the same. Sometimes that can be flipped. So Daemon Targaryen doesn't have to be Jon just because of the gender. But it does seem like something Jon would do. Risk himself to try to take out the enemy. It fits. There's a rumor that Daemon Targaryen survived on the God's Eye Lake. Okay, so that gives you the idea that Jon could survive with the aid of Greenseers, right? Instead of surviving on the Isle of Faces, Jon will survive either in the Weirwood Net as a dead man, or more likely through the help of, Bran, Children of the Forest, and stuff like that. So I'd say that probably that will be Jon. But it would be Jon and Dany. I do expect Jon and Dany to be on the same side by the time they both have dragons. So yeah. Thank you. Good questions today, folks. And by the way, if you have any other random Nightbringer questions, feel free to throw those in. I'm going to grab a couple more off Patreon still, too. Oh, gosh, I never fucking thought of this. And I know all about the Azores. So the Azores are an island chain in the Atlantic Ocean, roughly where Plato said Atlantis was. And evidence shows that, of course, sea levels were much lower, as much as 400 feet lower during the end of the last ice age. So the Azores would have been a much bigger island chain. The Azores have those haplogroup X people, and it sounds more like conspiratorial than it is. There's just different, haplogroup is just different types of blood. Haplogroup X is not like for X-Men or mutants or anything like that. It's just a type of blood or a subgroup. I'm not a biologist. Help me out. A haplogroup it's a scientific classification. Okay. So the haplogroup X people are known by blue eyes and red hair. And the people in Northern Africa, the Berber tribes, they show that exact coloring. Shout out to the band Tanarwen. I'm sure there's somebody that knows Tanarwen. They're awesome. They're a North African, a Moroccan, fucking rock and roll band. They're awesome. So some people think that haplogroup X people, who, by the way, it's the same as the Irish, all the red hair is haplogroup X. So the Irish people have haplogroup X. We find it scattered around in some weird places. There's an Indian tribe, a Native American tribe near the Great Lakes that has haplogroup X and red hair and pale skin, or lighter skin, I believe. Definitely the red hair and the blue eyes. And then there's also the red ochre people of the Atlantic coast, who may have had red hair as well. So this is very theoretical, but some people think that the haplogroup X is a marker of this long-lost Atlantean genetic bloodline. Obviously very speculative because Atlantis probably didn't exactly exist. But the Azores are a big part of Atlantean folklore is the point, and have been for a long time. So George may have been thinking about the name Azor Ahai coming from the Great Empire of the Dawn, which is very much like Atlantis. He could have been thinking about that as an Azores Island tie-in. I'm sorry if I went too far on that, but I'm very tickled. I love Atlantis mythology. Yes, redheads have superpowers. You guys are Atlanteans. You redheads are Atlanteans, man. Maybe. I don't know. The cool thing about the haplogroup X too is it's not just like I said, African people have it too. So it's not associated with a specific skin tone. It's the blue eyes and red hair combo that pops up. So it is pretty interesting. And I was thinking about, you guys know I'm going to write a fantasy series that is pseudo Atlantis. It's not actually going to be Atlantis, but it's going to be my version of Atlantis or Numenor or something, because I'm bored with the Middle Ages and I'm sick of fantasy authors putting the cool civilizations 10,000 years in the past. I want to talk about Numenor, the Great Empire of the Dawn, and Atlantis. So my Atlanteans, I was thinking about making them sort of a medium golden skin tone with the red hair and the blue eyes. That way, they're sort of not, you can't see them as like white people or black people or Asian people. They'll be sort of, because they're supposed to be older. This is like before some of these different because, you know, race isn't real. Race, what we perceive as race mostly is like a little bit of divergent evolution and divergent culture and things like that. Some of us bred with different, you know, Denisovans or Neanderthals and stuff like that. However, Atlantis, I'm thinking, should be, as a people, and again, sorry for getting off topic, should be a people that like everyone can read themselves into. This is like the mother culture of Egypt, but also people in the Americas and also the Stonehenge builders. You know, that's the idea. So I'm thinking if I give them like a medium golden skin tone and red and blue, you know, red hair, blue eyes, it's kind of a confusing mix and defies the easy, like, oh, I'm supposed to see these as Chinese people. Or so, like, you're not supposed to see them as anybody but Atlanteans, who are mythical people that are ancestors to us all, potentially. So Great Empire of the Dawn seems to be the same. Again, George is telling us that when the Great Empire of the Dawn broke up, we had all these different pockets of civilizations that rose up. The, you know, Yeti and Ashai and Herkun and Nefer and the Jogos Nai. And those people have different looks by now because we're 10,000 years later. And, you know, they've lived in different parts of the world and eaten different foods. And, you know, Jogos Nai are short and Dothraki are tall and whatever else. Haplogroup X arose from haplogroup N roughly 30,000 years ago, just prior to during the last glacial maximum, Carl Karsnark says. Thank you. And it is a mitochondrial DNA haplogroup. It's found in America, Europe, Western Asia, North Africa, and the Horn of Africa. Yeah, it's scattered in some weird places. It almost looks like they are the descendants of people who were seafaring and landed different places and left little scattered genes everywhere. So that's why people think, oh, these were the, you know, the escaped survivors of Atlantis. Because there are, to me, the best part of the Atlantis mythology that makes the most sense is this universal myth of the seven sages, or these sage builder gods, like a Quetzalcoatl figure who comes from across the sea and teaches the native people stuff, science and technology and learning. Frequently, they claim to be from a drowned land. We find that myth in Egypt and we find it in the Americas. This is some Graham Hancock stuff here. So it could be, there's just enough of it to look at it and think, well, if survivors did escape from Atlantis with a little bit of the old knowledge, perhaps they helped kickstart the next wave of new civilizations. And that's where these kind of myths would come from. Oh, these strange, tall people on boats came and they knew stuff about the stars and they taught us how to grow things. Because that's when farming arose, is right around 8,000, 9,000 BC in the Göbekli Tepe area of northern Turkey, Fertile Crescent, close to Egypt. Definitely one of the places where Atlantis survivors could have made it. And any megalithic building culture is potentially an Atlantis, you know, descendant. If we're barking up this tree. What I think about Atlantis is that, in general, the universal flood mythology is referring to the end of the last ice age, the rapid collapse of these ice sheets, and this rapid sea level rise that would have happened is punctuated in three main bursts. Could have been triggered by comets, definitely. That's one theory. So I don't know if there was one Atlantis that's like what Plato's talking about, but what is true is that any human habitation or civilization or culture that would have existed before the Younger Dryas, a lot of it would have been wiped out. The same way I talk about the Long Night. The Younger Dryas is very much a cultural bottleneck. And at one point, the world's civilization the population got down real small, they think. Yeah, so Doggerland, I was actually just watched a video about Doggerland. Doggerland is the region, it's under low-lying water. It's basically between the Netherlands and France and the UK. And it's in between Denmark and the UK. And it's a large area of land, probably about the third the size of England, that used to be above the waves until about 7,000 years ago. And they've recently started making some big discoveries there. They're finding Stone Age, you know, stuff from about 9,000 BC, 10,000 BC. So Doggerland is another type of play. Like, this shows you where the Atlantis type myths came from. There was a lot of land that got submerged around that time. And so we find myths about floods and we find myths about fabled sunken places, you know, and over time you could see maybe those sunken places getting built up, becoming more and more grand until they're Atlantis or something like that. But I don't not believe in Atlantis either. I just, I know for a fact that we lost a lot of coastline as the sea levels rose. So that to me is the general truth behind the idea of Atlantis myths, but there could be something more specific. Yeah, Randall Carson too. Yeah, I've been listening to some of his podcasts. Mythography podcast. Mythogia, is that what it is? Mythogia, his podcast. He was looking for the word mythical astronomy. Didn't quite find it. That's right. I think I actually did invent the word mythical astronomy. I don't think anyone else has ever said that. I think that is literally my term that I came up with. Seems like a really obvious term, but. So let's see here. Let me go over to Patreon. I had a couple people sending questions. Yes. Jason, your question about Elric and Widow's Wail, I'm going to save for tomorrow. We talk about swords more. We're talking more meteors tonight. Hypatia says, how do we even know that the comets from Danny's point of view and Westeros are the same comet? Well, because the comet is hanging in one place in space. And so as the planet turns, everybody is getting a view of it. But the comet is not like spinning around the Earth. The comet is orbiting the sun like the Earth on an orbit that probably intersects Earth's orbit because it's so big in the sky, as bright as the moon in one passage, that it must be very close. Might have even passed between Planetos and the moon. So everyone would have seen it as the Earth turned. And if there were two comets, people would have seen two comets. So it's not like the people on one side of the Earth would see one and on the other side they'd see the other. And let's see here. Hypatia says, what's the Harbinger? Oh, and she's quoting the Harbinger quote that I already read. So Harbinger is, it means something. Let me just pull up the exact definition, but it basically just means a Harbinger is like a foretelling or a foreshadowing of doom. Person or thing that announces or signals the approach of another. Okay. So they don't have to be negative. John the Baptist was a harbinger of Christ. So I'm going to read something that Graham Hancock has actually read before. And that's where I found this quote. So all credit to Graham Hancock. This is legends of the Ojibwa people in North America that seem to have recorded the Younger Dryas comet that we're talking about. I didn't quite talk about it. I mentioned the Younger Dryas. It's a period of rapid cooling. It was 1,200 years of deep freeze when right before that, the Ice Age had been steadily receding. And during that deep freeze, a lot of things died. It was very dark times. That is, it coincides with the date Plato gave for Atlantis. We now, I won't say no, but we strongly suspect this Younger Dryas comet theory is solidified over the last 10 years. And it seems as though a comet broke up over the North American ice sheet and maybe hit a little bit of Europe too. And that is what caused the Younger Dryas. It basically vaporized so much water from the glaciers that all of that meltwater ran into the Atlantic Ocean and disrupted the ocean currents of the world. The God, what do we call the currents, guys? I have ADD. I forget words. Anyways, the network of ocean currents that runs around the planet is super important. That is why Europe is warm instead of cold like Canada, right? So if you disrupt those major currents in the ocean, then you are going to screw up the climate big time. And that is one of the tipping points that we are worried about. Is if we disrupt that Atlantic stream, then then we are going, then Europe could get cold. Basically, we need that warm water to get carried up around Europe to keep it warm. Otherwise, it's going to turn into like northern Canada. So this ties into the Hammer of the Waters, obviously, because the Hammer of the Waters merged two oceans together, right? Like we had previously, the Narrow Sea was part of the North Sea, and the Summer Sea was below the Arm of Dorne, and they were completely separate. When we break the Arm of Dorne, we have a very cold ocean and a very warm ocean suddenly mixing. So that's going to completely change all of the global ocean currents and completely change the weather. So that is another thing about the long night. Like, yeah, moon meteors and snow and all that stuff. But actually, if Martin wanted to, he could attribute all of it to the breaking of the Arm of Dorne and the fact that these oceans mixed together. That would change the entire circulation pattern around the world, or a lot of it. And that would change the weather. And it could lead to a period of winter. That seems to be what happened with the Younger Dryas. So here now, we're going to consider mythology of a couple of different people from North America that seem to be talking about a great comet impact. The Brule people of the Lakota Nation in modern-day South Dakota have a legend of, quote, a fiery blast that shook the entire world, toppling mountain ranges and setting forests and prairies ablaze. Even the rocks glowed red hot, and the giant animals and evil people burned up where they stood. The rivers overflowed their banks and surged across the landscape. Finally, the Creator stamped the earth, and with a great quake, the earth split open, sending torrents across the entire world until only a few mountain peaks stood above the flood. So this sounds exactly like somebody writing about the Hammer of the Waters. If we could get regional folklore from Dorne about the hammer, it might sound exactly like that, right? The Creator stamped the earth, and then it split open. Okay, so the Ojibwa people of Canada refer to a comet called the Long-Tailed Heavenly Climbing Star. Long-Tailed Heavenly Climbing Star, which swept low through the skies, scorching the earth and leaving behind, quote, a different world. After that, survival was hard work. The weather was colder than before. Ojibwa shaman Fred Pine says, it came down here once thousands of years ago, just like a sun. It had radiation and burning heat in its tail. It was just so hot that everything, even the stones, were cooked. The giant animals were killed off. You can find their bones today in the earth. It is said that the comet came down and spread his tail for miles and miles. So it's very poetic. And again, this is mythical astronomy. This is the phenomenon which I am describing when I say mythical astronomy. It's not astrology. I sometimes get people ask me about that. It's nothing to do with astrology. It's very simple. Astronomy being observation of the stars. Mythical astronomy means writing myths based on the observation of the stars. So this isn't quite a myth. It's more of like mythical language applied to it. But we have this story about evil people being burned up. So you can imagine a tale joining this one where we talk more about the evil people and how it was their fault that the heavenly climbing star came down and murdered everyone or something like that, right? So if we were to take that kind of language and use it to describe this long night event, it might sound something like this. It might sound like the moon cracked open and the bleeding stars came down to the earth like dragons and brought blood and flame everywhere they went, drowning islands and waking thunderous giants in the earth, hammering and breaking the world and blotting out the very sun. The cold that came after was unstoppable and killed everything that the burning stars had spared. So there's your LML folkloric recounting of the long night. But you get the idea. No, I have not read this person's name, who I cannot pronounce. But leave a comment below the video and tell me about it, because I'm sure it's interesting if you're suggesting it to me. So pretty cool stuff, right? You can see, again, why I'm talking about cursed stars and the ominous foreboding with which comets are regarded. It's because sometimes they do that. They burn up all the rocks and the animals. And of course, this is another accurate thing. This climate shift of the younger Dryas is probably what eliminated a lot of the large big game animals in North America. Some of it was hunting, obviously, too. But this climate shift is a big culprit. So there we go. Now, I got another PayPal. Hypatia passing along a question from King Kraken. Teamwork. How do you think Evenfall and House Tarth being called the Even Star plays into this? Well, I did go into this more in the Brienne stream from last week, so I don't want to repeat myself too much. But I pointed out that on Tarth, the old city on Tarth Island is called Morn. So morning, and now we're at Evenfall Hall, and the ruler of Evenfall Hall is called the Even Star. So we've transformed from people that ruled at Morn to people that rule at Evenfall Hall. Then we look at the sigil of Tarth, and we see both the sun and the moon. And of course, Lightbringer, the moon wandered too close to the sun. The moon dragons drank the fire of the sun. So you have the pieces of moon, but they're fiery like the sun. It means they have part of both of their parents. So Lightbringer symbolizes sort of the alchemical joining of opposites, sun and moon, ice and fire, light and dark, that kind of thing. So that's basically what House Tarth is talking about. The sun and the moon, and one is at sunset and one's at sunrise, morn, evenfall. Brienne is called the beauty, and that's a reference to Venus. Okay, so Brienne the beauty, she's the daughter of the Even Star. She is literally the Even Star herself, or you could say the Morning Star. Then she's carrying around a sword that is compared to the comet, which is Lightbringer, which is more Venus mythology. So it's all Lightbringer stuff. And then we also talked about the legend of Galadon of Morn, which has parallels to Lightbringer and Dawn and all that stuff. So Starpike of House Peak. Let's look up their sigil. Ooh, it's 3 black castles on a field of orange. So this House Peak controlled 3 castles. That's why. But black castles on a field of orange is basically like meteor symbolism to say. I mean, there's a bunch of black castles that are associated with Azor High, and they're always backlit with a fire symbol. That's the moon wandering too close to the sun. It's the eclipse symbol, essentially. But more relevant, a pike. Okay, a pike is 2 things. It's either a spear or a fish. So a star pike is a star spear, and that's easy to see as a meteor symbol because we also have sun spears used as meteor symbols. However, a pike is in a fish gives us the sea dragon mythology of the Iron Islands, where it says the Great King slew a sea dragon that drowned whole islands in its wrath, right? Well, if dragons are falling comets and meteors, a sea dragon that drowns islands is, in my estimation, a meteor that falls in the ocean or near the ocean, near enough to cause huge tidal waves and drown the land. That's what happened at the Arm of Dorne. The land was drowned, and it also seems to have happened at the Iron Islands. If you look at Castle Pike, it's crumbling, right? It's built on these pillars that are crumbling away. And Castle Pike is also older than the Ironborn. It was supposedly they found it there. They don't know who built it, just like the Seastone Chair. So it's been there a long time. And it seems like the Iron Islands have crumbled since it was built. So there has been land that has been drowned at the Iron Islands. So sea dragon is a meteor that falls in the ocean. And a star pike is just another way of saying a star that becomes a fish, swims in the water. So there you go. There's moon meteor symbolism literally everywhere in A Song of Ice and Fire. And the reason why, it's not because the meteors are so important. It's just that George really wants to talk about transformation That is the main topic, alchemical transformation. It's either when two people make a child, or more often when one person undergoes a transformation and is reborn, either magically or as a character. And so by creating this celestial schema of a sun impregnating a moon with its comet, or stabbing a moon with its comet, which births more dragon meteor comets, it's just a template for, like I said, procreation. It's a template for transformation, because the moon starts off a shiny moon, then it gets killed. Oh no, the moon. But it turns into dragon meteors, which are powerful and destructive. Dany similarly turns into a character without power. She's the Silver Queen and the moon of Drogo's life. She's an adjunct to Drogo, but then she walks too close to the fire of her son, bursts the dragons. She also transforms herself, becomes reborn. She becomes the last dragon. So that is like a moon turning into a dragon meteor. That's what Dany does at the alchemical wedding. She starts as a moon character, turns into a dragon, a meteor character, because that's what happens to the moon. So that's why there's moon meteor symbolism everywhere. It's because it's like the outline, it's the skeleton onto which all the transformation stories get grafted. So there's always that layer to it. But the most important thing is always the heart in conflict, as I like to say. Okay, so I had some stuff that I had some moon meteor quotes that I wanted to read that I didn't put in the video that I had saved. But we're already about 2 hours here, and I definitely want to wrap this up. So I will save those for tomorrow. Tomorrow at 3 Pacific, 10 GMT, 6 Eastern, normal Starry Wisdom Sunday time, we'll be doing Curse of the Black Swords instead of Curse of the Black Bleeding Stars. So we'll be taking more Nightbringer questions, but focusing on the magic swords. I've got more on Elric and Tolkien, and I'll read some of these moon meteor quotes tomorrow too. So I will quickly take a last call for questions if anybody wants to sneak some in. Let me make sure I got all my patron ones too. Looks like I did, except for the ones that I'm saving for tomorrow. And let's check the PayPalies. Looks like up to date there. Yeah, it's been 2 hours. It did fly by, didn't it? It was a good one. Oh, heck, I'll read a couple of quotes real quick. Man, why are people yelling out my house at 2 a.m.? Man, go the fuck home. Anyway, okay. So, let's see, where were we? Which one do I want to read? Oh, yes. This is good because I used this quote, part of it in the video. I referenced it, actually. I talked about Drogo's hair. Black, oily hair. It spread out behind him like a river of darkness. And since Drogo is obviously a sun figure, a river of darkness spreading out from his hair is a long night symbol, right? Well, let's check out the longer quote because it has more clues. Drogo did not reply. His long, heavy braid was coiled in the dirt beside him. He pulled it over his right shoulder and began to remove the bells from his hair one by one. After a moment, Dany leaned forward to help. When they were done, then that's when she undoes his braid. It takes a long time. He sat there silently watching her. When she was done, he shook his hair. He shook his head, and his hair spread out behind him like a river of darkness, oiled and gleaming. Okay, so if Drogo's face is the sun, and river of darkness hair is the darkness of the long night spreading out, well, what do you think the bells are? Tinkling little silver and gold bells in black hair. Painkiller Jane figured it out. They're stars. Obviously, they're stars. The bells they stand for victories, and the slain Dothraki become stars. So it's pretty easy to see that the bells would be stars. So not only are they uncoiling the darkness hair, They're taking the bells out of his hair. So that means they're pulling the stars out of the sky, right? So the stars are being hidden. The river of darkness is hiding the sun and the stars. That's basically the idea. So also his braid is black and oiled, and it's coiled also. So coiled, that's like a snake term, right? Snakes coil. So we've got a black oily snake that comes from the sun. Don't put this in the gutter. We're talking about moon meteors here, okay? The oily black stone is what I'm really talking about. Oberon's spear is another big meteor symbol, and its point is coated in a black poison that looks like oil. So this is one of the big clues about the moon meteors being toxic, being cursed, being poisonous to the land, being evil. Oberon's spear is one of the best moon meteor symbols, and its tip has oily black poison. Then we see Drogo's hair, his darkness. The black oil is associated with it. So we're talking about the oily black stone of Ashai and other places being associated with the moon meteors. I basically say that stone was burnt when the meteors landed. So it's not necessarily meteorite stone. It's the result of the meteorite burning the ground and creating new stone that is a hybrid of the meteors and the earth, which is exactly what happens when meteors hit the ground. So lots of oily clues. Let's see, what are some other ones? Well, I forget, but the point is I'm telling you that these meteors are cursed, right? Curse of the bleeding stars. Well, many of the Lightbringer symbols have that black poison association, and that's one of the big clues that the meteors are cursed. So here's a scene where Dany's eating the horse heart, which, by the way, is a bunch of symbolism. Dany is a moon character. She's eating a bloody heart. Well, if the meteors are hearts of fallen stars, then the red comet could be a big red heart. And of course, the red comet that Dany sees, she thinks of as Drogo's stallion. So she's eating the red stallion heart. So this is the moon eating the comet when the comet crashes into the moon. So listen to this quote and think about that. Despite the tender mother's stomach that afflicted her these past 2 moons, Dany dined on bowls of half-clotted blood to accustom herself to the taste, and Irri made her chew strips of dried horse flesh until her jaws were aching. So these past 2 moons, she's been filling up with blood so she can give birth to the bleeding stars, right? Once there were 2 moons in the sky. Yeah, it's right there. So then it says, her stomach roiled and heaved, yet she kept on, her face smeared with a heart's blood that sometimes seemed to explode against her lips. So you think of weirwood stigmata, obviously, but you think of the moon eating the bleeding star, eating the bloody heart, and the blood is now exploding. So we've got the bleeding stars exploding from the face of the moon. Then it says, Khal Drogo stood over her as she ate. So there's the sun, his face hard as a bronze shield, literally a circular sun symbol. It says his long black braid was shiny with oil. So again, the idea that these oily black stones are ready to come from the sun as soon as the moon is done eating the bleeding star. So it's a lot of mythical astronomy there. Let's see. One of my favorite ones is the Storm of Swords, from which the book takes its name. Yeah, easy there, chat. We're going pretty far into the gutter. Careful there, guys. When they reached the top of the ridge and saw the river, this is Arya's POV, by the way, Sandor Clegane reined up hard and cursed. The rain was falling from a black iron sky, pricking the green and brown torrent with 10,000 swords. So the rain is like swords, and it's falling from a black iron sky. So we should think of black iron falling from the sky like swords. It's the Storm of Swords. Now, go back to the Waymar prologue. His sword breaks and explodes, giving you a meteor shower symbol. and it's like a rain of needles. Arya's sword is called Needle, and here she is watching the rain come down like swords. So, circular symbolism here. Basically, if the meteors can be swords, then they can be a storm of swords. Like it could be a shower of bleeding stars, shower of moon blood, or a storm of swords. So this quote is literally a storm of swords. So that's one of my favorites. Only the brightest stars were visible all to the west. A dull red glow lit the sky to the northeast, the color of a blood bruise. Tyrion had never seen a bigger moon. Monstrous, swollen. It looked as if it had swallowed the sun and woken with a fever. Its twin, floating on the sea beyond the ship, shimmered red with every wave. So here's more. I just told you Dany eating the horse heart is like the moon swallowing the comet, right? Well, the comet comes from the sun in the mythical terminology. It's like the sun's sword or the sun's seed, or if you're doing the skin changer metaphor, it's like the sun's spirit going into an animal or into the weirwood tree. So here we have the moon looking swollen and monstrous, as if it had swallowed the sun and gotten sick with a fever. So this definitely sounds like a moon pregnant with monsters. It's sick, it's bloody, and this is, of course, everything looks red because they're sailing by Valyria here. So the implication of the doom is added on top of all that. How old am I and watched Breaking Bad? I'm 41, and I have not watched Breaking Bad yet. I probably never will. Hate to tell you. Probably not gonna. I just don't like the subject matter. I don't like drug culture that isn't pot or acid culture, basically. So that's kind of why. I know it's a good show, but probably never gonna watch it. Nope, no, probably not. Probably not. So here's let's see. Oh yeah, here's one that I wanted to ask you about. The moon was a black hole in the sky. This is from a brand chapter of Dance with Dragons. The moon was a black hole in the sky. Wolves howled in the wood, sniffing through snowdrifts after dead things. A murder of ravens erupted from the hillside, screaming their sharp cries, black wings beating above a white world. A red sun rose and set and rose again, painting the snows in shades of rose and pink. Under the hill, Jojen brooded, Mira fretted, and Hodor wandered through dark tunnels, with a sword in his hand and a torch in his left. Or was it Bran wandering? No one must ever know. The great cavern that opened on the abyss was as black as pitch, black as tar, blacker than the feathers of a crow. Light entered as a trespasser, unwanted and unwelcome, and soon was gone again. Cook fires, candles, and rushes burned for a little while, then guttered out, their brief lives at an end. So, yeah, I know. I don't look 41. I'm sorry to ruin the image here of me as young and scrappy. Yeah. So what was I saying? Okay, so this last paragraph is describing a black hole. First, it says the moon was a black hole in the sky, which I assume is describing a new moon or a crescent moon, where the crescent is just a tiny little sliver. We're going to talk about this in a minute. There actually is no way that the moon can appear as a black hole in the sky. So I'm not even sure what Martin is doing here other than to imply the moon as the source of the darkness of the long night, okay? So he says the moon was like a black hole in the sky, and then he describes this cavern. It's the abyss, black as tar, black as pitch, blacker than the feathers of a crow. Light enters as a trespasser, and then was soon gone again. That is a black hole. Light gets literally swallowed up by the black hole. So the idea of the moon as a black hole that's swallowing up light, that's telling you the darkness of the long night came from the moon. The sun was swallowed up by the moon. That's the moon eclipsing the sun and then exploding and covering its face. Then the moon meteors covering the sun from the earth by filling the sky with smoke and ash. So pretty cool imagery there about the moon. And then when it says a red sun rose and set again, well, guys, when there's smoke in the sky, the sun turns red. As a California resident, I've seen the sun red many times when there's wildfires, and it's always shocking and apocalyptic looking. It's very red. So that kind of goes with the whole picture here. All right, folks, I'm going to go ahead and call it a wrap there. Thank you for coming out. It was fun seeing Quinn. Yes, thank you, Quinn. Quinn's ideas. And those of you who will be awake tomorrow, come join me tomorrow and we'll talk about the Star Sword, the cursed sword end of things. So yeah, this was a fun stream. Thank you all for participating and sending me great questions. And yeah, I will see you tomorrow. Moon meteors.